Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
To like shining the spotlight on people who can inspire others or who are doing really great things, because it is one story can really make a difference. I love that I am in a career where I'm just always learning new things. I like to call it type 2 fun. Like in the moment, you're just like, this is crazy and are we gonna survive? And then looking back, those make for the best stories. Called Anatomy of a Workout, that gave readers workouts and really educated them as to like why they were doing certain exercises. It's very easy, especially when it's the holidays or work gets busy, to let the day disappear, and it's like you're the only person who's going to set aside time for you. I'm lucky the Wall Street Journal column is every week like clockwork, and I try to have that planned out 2 months in advance. Right now I probably average about a story a day. I have learned, if you don't ask, you don't know. This is Jem Murphy, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
You're quite an epic follow on Instagram, and you have had quite a career, and it has allowed you to do a lot of epic things, and we try to emulate that sort of lifestyle, and I think you live that life that a lot of people imagine of or dream of, and you've somehow, some way figured out how to make that happen. So we want to dig into that and ask you some of those questions and maybe help some people figure out how to follow their passion and never work a day in their life.
Well, it's funny living in Hawaii, because you tell them the time difference and they're thinking like, where does she live? And then you're like, oh, I live in Maui. And the reaction is always like, oh, it's paradise. And I'm like, I don't lay on the beach all day. And it's actually 4 a.m. right now. And I'm like, not right now, but a lot of times I'm up by 4 to hop on calls. But yeah, every dream situation has its sacrifices. For sure. And being a writer, it's tricky. Some of the younger athletes at the gym I train at in Maui are always like, what are you training for? And I'm like, I basically sit on my butt and write 90% of the time. But then when an editor calls and asks me to do something cool, like I don't want to, at 41 years old, kind of want to be conditioned to do it and not get hurt.
Absolutely. So, I mean, let's start from the beginning. You are a writer and an editor, and you've worked for probably any major publication that anyone listening has read before. So how did the journey of becoming a writer and editor start for you?
I actually went to journalism school. I was lucky enough in elementary school, I had a teacher who made us journal, and I just loved writing. Like it was an easy way for someone who was kind of shy to express themselves. And early on, I thought I'd want to be a news reporter or a political reporter. So I went to a school specifically to study journalism at a time when there was no Instagram or social media. And I remember we had a 5-year program. So my 3rd year, this woman came in as a guest speaker, and she was a freelance writer who had worked on staff at Conde Nast Traveler. And essentially was like, I get paid to travel and ski and eat and golf. And I'm like, wait, that's a job? Like I had no idea. So I kind of latched myself onto her, and she really was my mentor throughout college and would give me some research assignments for her assignments at Conde Nast Traveler. So even in college, an interesting part of going to school is you go to all these classes and you sit in and you listen, but then you graduate and people want to see clips. And if you haven't put in the work working at the school newspaper or freelancing on the side, like you have no clips to show. So Nicole really gave me a bunch of assignments right out the bat. And then I did a magazine internship my junior year in New York City. And you could, as an applicant, you could request the magazines you wanted to work for. And I think my top three were like National Geographic, Travel and Leisure, like all of the travel and adventure magazines. And Food and Wine selected me as their intern. And I was just like, this has to be a mistake. Like, I don't cook. I'm too young to drink. I am the pickiest eater in the world. And my mom actually convinced me to take the position just for the experience of being in New York. And it was just so fun. And I had great colleagues. I got to learn the art of, producing a magazine, working with amazing writers. And I think the team at Food and Wine was so amused by my naivety that they kept me on for 6 months. It's like, what's Jen gonna do next that's gonna make everyone laugh? Because as a college kid, like I wasn't eating at fancy restaurants. I remember my first week, the woman who was my mentor, the assistant, invited me to a whiskey tasting at, I think it was like 9 a.m. And as a college kid, she knew exactly what I would do. And the distiller was there and he laid out the shot glasses and, poured. And she was like, Jen should go first. And I just, slammed it back like a shot. And he's like, yeah, that was for everyone to taste. Like, oh my God. But yeah, I went on, I could not, they didn't have an opening when I graduated college and I wanted to travel around Europe. And when I got back, I got hired, I have no idea how, at the Wall Street Journal. To this day, I think it was because the editor loved hockey. And I just happened to write for a hockey magazine at Northeastern in Boston, even though I really don't have much interest in hockey. But it very quickly, people very quickly realized business was not my passion. And I was very lucky that a woman at the Journal had read my resume really carefully and saw that I was a personal trainer in college. And she was like, I have this idea for a fitness column and I want to give it to you. And I remember everyone on staff laughed. They're like, no one's going to read this. And Jamie was like, this is the fluff. Like, after reading all the serious news, people want the fluff. And now, 16 years later, which is crazy, I still have that column. So, but I did, after a year at the Journal, Food and Wine had an opening. And I just remember thinking, everyone in the food world was happy and everyone at the Wall Street Journal was stressed. And so I left. And yeah, I spent much of my 20s eating and drinking before I was like, this is not a sustainable lifestyle. But yeah, I feel very lucky that I had great mentors around me and just doors opened at the right time.
Sounds like you got to do a little Anthony Bourdain in your 20s, getting to go around and travel and everything like that. One thing I wanted to go back to was one of the first things you said was when you got into writing, it was because a teacher gave you a journal and you were able to get things out that maybe you can't get out as yourself. Do you feel that you do your best work when you can write opposed to having to speak for yourself? Do you feel like it might be like two separate people at this point?
I do think so. And it's interesting, as you learn this as you get into the journalism industry, especially as a freelancer, each publication has a different voice. So I joke, during my years at Food and Wine, I was the travel editor. If you look closely at my travel stories, they were all destinations where I would go surfing on my time off. So they weren't really truly culinary destinations like Nicaragua or Panama. But I knew the voice the editor-in-chief wanted. So every intro would be me comparing myself to some celebrity, which in real life I would never do. But writing also lets you kind of take on these different personas in a way. And there's a beautiful, like, nowadays where it's just constant content churning. You don't always get this luxury, but there's something really, at least in my mind, beautiful about the process of writing and working with an editor who's there to help shape your words. I might think what I have down on paper is crystal clear. To have an editor help me, really make the word shine and make my point get across very clearly, it's a true luxury. Some publications will do 4 or 5 rounds of edits, which is not not the norm nowadays.
Do you feel like you could edit yourself, or do you feel like you need that other person to kind of filter some of your thoughts?
So in today's fast-paced, short-staffed world, I often catch myself editing myself. And as much as I'd like to think I'm a perfect writer, no one is perfect. And there are times where you're just tired, or if you have a 5,000 word story, like you might not realize you just used the word epic 7 times in that. So having been an editor, I can go back and look for the normal redundancies and mistakes, but I do think it's always nice to have an outside editor help.
We'll go back to that journal. We're all Point Borough Panthers on here.
Oh yeah.
Did you go to Ocean Road? Was it a teacher that we all might remember, or at
It
least I might
was.
remember?
It was Miss Fleming in the enrichment program.
Oh
And
shit!
all my journal characters, and this is so nerdy, I still have. I mean, I've always had a journal since, and I have every journal since my, how old were we? First grade. I always think like, if something happens to me, do I want people to be able to read these? I'm sure there's some teenage angst in a lot of them, but yeah, I think the beauty, like so often we had those journal characters. Like that journal also let you be creative, which I don't think kids get forced to do a lot these days.
Yeah, that is. It's a lost art, and
It is.
I think 20, the last 20 months or whatever it is has allowed us to kind of appreciate and have gratitude for a lot of the little things and the simple things, and also kind of we're seeing a lot of kind of hearkening back to the days of old, whether it be journaling or reading books as opposed to having a Kindle or something like that, doing these old school sorts of things. So I don't feel bad. I have a collection of journals that I've carried around with me more as an adult than I didn't do, as a kid, as a boy. In the 80s, journaling was just never even something. Like it was, oh dear diary type of things, that it was never.
Exactly.
Yeah, like if word got out in the mean streets of Point Pleasant, you as a boy were journaling, look out. But yeah, most of my journals that have made the rounds traveling with me over the last 10 years are all adult journals, but it has things from, ayahuasca experiences in Peru to all kinds of 100-mile race trainings. And so yeah, I think journaling is an important thing. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of things that we did as kids that hopefully people are bringing and returning their kids back to doing some of those sorts of things. And I think creativity is one of them. Getting outside and just getting dirty is another one that, we probably appreciate a hell heck of a lot now. Forest bathing is a real thing, and there's a huge amount of energy that can come from just spending time in nature. So definitely need to encourage those sorts of things in the youth.
And I think that was one of I loved my time in New York City. I don't think I would be where I am today in my career if I hadn't put in the dues. But I remember working at Food and Wine, sitting in a windowless cubicle until, 10 p.m. at night, just thinking how I hadn't seen sunlight all day. And I'd be sending these writers on these amazing trips around the world. And in my head, I'm like, I want to be that person getting sent around the world. And it was very evident to anyone who knew me well in New York City. Like it was a show, like me wearing fancy clothes and high heels to go to these, star-studded events. It was fun, but it didn't truly feel like me. And people would catch me as soon as I left an event. My heels would be off, my sneakers would be on. So yeah, I feel like people have, when you follow your heart and what's true to you, people have respect for that. So when I left to freelance and live a life where I can be in the mountains and